What is going on, my YouTube gamers out there? Hopefully everybody is doing fantastic, enjoying the little things in life. For example, licking Cheeto dust off of your fingers after a just delectable bag of chips, or taking a massive deuce after holding it in for a few hours because you're afraid of public toilets. Just the simple things in life. Enjoy them. Anyways, let's get straight into today's list. We're going to be looking at the top 5 Gears of War spin-off video games that we would like to see. And obviously, we know the Gears of War franchise isn't afraid to expand. We saw this very similarly with the Gears of War Tactics video game, which introduced a lot of new characters and really explored a different era of the Gears of War universe. We also saw them expand with Gears of War Judgment and give Damon Baird his own video games, both of them being somewhat divisive, not necessarily having the greatest ratings. They were considered mediocre Gears of War video games, but they are still really good entries into the Gears of War universe, and they still have a very good following. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that they would continue to expand on the Gears of War universe, considering a lot of what happens in the original trilogy is spanned across over a decade, really, of battling the Locust. But anyways, let's get straight into it with number 5. Am I the only one that thinks that Queen Mira is an absolute babe? I mean, the way she goes around ordering the Locust and just beating down their self-esteem. Give me some of that, please. She is definitely one of the more foxier women in Gears of War. But jokes aside, she has a really, really good deep backstory, some really good lore, and there are some very good reasons for why she decides to lead the rebellion. And she has just a very dark and very torn childhood that I think everybody should delve into. We kind of get little brief glimpses here and there, through the comic books and through the actual, Audible books as well. Like I said, it would just be a really interesting or intricate, complex universe if they decided to introduce Mira's backstory or her origin story. Moving on to number 4, it's not really like an origin story for a specific character, but I would love to see more of the Pendulum Wars. We did get to play a couple of missions here and there throughout the franchise that involved the UIR and, the COG army, so it would be really interesting to get to see a little bit more of that specific time frame within the Gears of War franchise, or within the Gears of War universe, I should say. It would be better to get more than just glimpses of, that battle, and really getting to see, I guess the fallout, the carnage that it left behind, because the Pendulum Wars were pretty intense. And it would be nice to see, all of the original characters, kind of see them develop and grow into, the hardened veterans that we saw later in the franchise. And even if they decided to bring in a new protagonist, I wouldn't be against it, just so they can continue to flesh out and, build a wider foundation for the Gears of War universe. For number 3, I think we all want to see a little bit more of EDay, really. We got little glimpses here and there throughout the Gears of War franchise, but very similar to what happens with the Pendulum Wars, it kind of gets bogged down. We don't really get a lot of information about what the people of the planet were going through, and so I'd be really interesting to really see them dive deep into a lot of maybe the obstacles and obviously a lot of the hardship that just the everyday normal citizens went through. I think it would be really interesting to see, as I mentioned with the Pendulum Wars, completely new cast of characters. Not to say that I don't want to eventually see a little bit more of Marcus and the cast, but I'd just love to see something where they add some fresh new faces and just get to see it from a different perspective. Obviously, EDay was a big significant part of the, Gears of War lore, and it feels like it hasn't been explored as much. So I do definitely feel like that is kind of an unexplored area, and I do feel like there's a lot more story to be told from, that particular time frame. I think the best comparison that we could throw in there would probably be like Halo Reach, where we got to see a completely different unit that we knew was doomed. We knew they were eventually going to meet, their fate, their end, but it was still a very interesting story. It was still very good storytelling overall, and I think that's what Gears of War really needs to explore a little bit more on. For number two, I definitely feel like we want to see a little bit more of these little settlements that started popping up mostly throughout Gears of War 3. I think is when they really started to explore it a little bit more. There were these little factions that were kind of against the COG army, and they had a lot of resentment towards them, primarily because they didn't like the tactics that they used. And in a lot of ways, they really were at fault. I mean, the Hammer of Dawn was a big, powerful weapon that the COGs decided to use almost unethically. And it would be nice to see, again, the story told from a completely different perspective from one of these little settlements or villages, and kind of see the story told from a completely different set of eyes with, individuals with completely, different objectives and different set of morals compared to the COGs, where most of them were just following orders or, going along with the game plan. So as I mentioned before, the Gears of War universe is very thick, it's very big, and I think there's still a lot more to explore out there. Not everything has to be, COG specific. I would be really interesting to see it from, different set of eyes for sure. Hold on to your wigs, hold on to your fake mustaches, hold on to your nasty, greasy sideburns, hold on to whatever is left of your dignity. For number one, we're definitely going to get a little bit controversial. I want a JD origin story, and I want a little bit of what Gears of War 4 and 5, the in-between little story there, the little meat on the bones that we just don't get to see. I would love to see that play out in a video game, and that's one of the bigger problems with Gears of War franchise. There's a lot of gappage going on from time to time. We see it a lot with the time span, I should say, from Gears of War 3 to Gears of War 4, where there's this big giant gap and we miss a lot of different storytelling. So maybe we get to explore a little bit of what happens between Gears of War 4 and 5 and why JD becomes the way that he is, but also maybe just an origin story of him growing up a little bit, or joining the COG army, maybe a little bit of losing his mother Anya. All of that stuff I think is very important to seeing JD develop and mold into this character. And I feel like even though it's been a great transition, JD is definitely one of my favorite characters. Even though he's not one of the originals, I still feel like there's a little bit more that we can explore on him as a main character. And maybe this doesn't even have to be like a main game, even though I would love to see it. Maybe like a side DLC, where we could explore a little bit of his upbringing, and obviously being raised by Marcus, which seems like an absolutely ridiculous thing. I just assume he would probably like feed him a bowl of like nuts and bolts. But regardless, I think he's one of the more intriguing characters right now in the new Gears of War franchise. And I feel like there's a little bit more to be explored. Even though, like I said, he's not one of the originals, you could get an origin story from every single one of these characters. But I still feel like JD at this moment is the future of the franchise, unless for some reason Collision decides to make his death canon in the previous Gears of War. But that's our list. That's our top 5, potential storylines for Gears of War 6. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. What story do you guys want told in Gears of War 6? I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say. Let me know in the comment section. And as always, guys, stay safe out there. I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.